Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast alongside Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick, and we are continuing our position preview series. We're going over to the defense. We're going to go to the defensive line. And, Joey, this is a unit that has depth, but I don't know that everybody has proven themselves yet. You got a couple of transfers in Zaylen Wood and Corday Sidner, who, like a couple of the offensive line transfers, have played a lot of football. And so, obviously, they will help. And I think they're even in some ways upgrades from what they had last year and just providing depth. But you've got some younger guys like Linus Zunk, Bradley Mann, Demarion Thomas. And real quick, we're talking about the interior and edge guys here.
Mm-hmm.
So I know technically those are different positions, but we're going to lump everybody in together. But you've got some older guys, you've got some younger guys, and you've got a guy like a Darren Agu, not to single him out, but he needs a big season, but we haven't seen a ton from him in camp. So this is a position that is obviously crucial, just like the offensive line. You're battling the trenches every week in the SEC. They've got to be better than they were last year, and I think they can. Joey, we got to wait and see. In game one, I think that'll be a really good test against a good Virginia Tech offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have a whole lot of difference makers last year, and last year Nate Clifton was their guy who really produced the most, and he's gone now. So I think there's a lot of questions there. I think they have a lot of bodies who can do some good things for them, and I think that helps them in a game like Virginia Tech where it's early, it's going to be hot, and you're going to have to rotate a lot. You look at a guy like Bradley Mann or a guy like Linus Zunk or a guy like Christian James, I think all those guys are going to have to play, and they're all going to have to help you. My question is, do they have enough difference makers? Can Devin Lee take a step into being a bigger piece? Can Corday Sidnor be a guy that really helps them? I don't think they really have that. They don't have a game record, and that's always been my concern here is just they have a lot of guys who can do some things, but I don't know if they have a guy who consistently week in and week out is going to show up and make a play or make his impact known, and that's just my concern with them. I think they have a lot of guys who can help, and I think maybe that helps them stop the run. Zaylen Wood, I think, will be a good guy for them. He put up good numbers at MTSU in the run and rushing and passer, so I think they've got some pieces. I think at certain positions have upgraded from what they've had in the past. I think at end, I like what they have. Obviously, Corday Sidnor, I think, is the vocal leader of the room. Darren Agu has probably the highest upside on anybody in this episode except for maybe Issa Wataha. And then Aeneas DeCosmo is another guy we haven't brought up. He's a leader and a guy who I think got a little bit better as the year went on, but I still have a lot of questions about their top end here. I think they have a lot of guys who can play and a lot of bodies that they can rotate. They have a lot of guys who are going to make huge impacts. That's my big question.
Yeah, let's start with that edge position there. You mentioned Darren Agu. You also brought up Corday Sidner, a transfer that played a lot of football at Purdue, and that's a battle. I think. I mean, Darren Agu, Corday Sidner. I would obviously give the edge to Corday Sidner, but you've also got other guys that have played a lot of football, like a Zaylen Wood. On the inside.
Inside and outside.
Yeah, exactly. So he might play that spot as well, that edge spot. But you've got guys that have been here that have almost been jumped a little bit, is what it feels like, whether it's Devin Lee, Darren Agu, Christian James. James has been hampered with injuries.
So is Agu to an extent, too.
Yes,
I think they've worked to get him healthy.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that. I mean, I think a lot of people on the board have been wondering and asking about Agu, and I mean, it's confused me as well. But I think he was hampered by injury last year, and that affected him probably more than we think on the outside. But I think that's a theme here, Joey. Vanderbilt bringing in transfers that they would have hoped to overtake some of these guys like they have, I think. But it also creates competition with the guys that have been here. So I think that's another thing to look for.
Yeah, I think a lot of time you don't recruit transfers to come in and sit the bench. I think that's kind of going to be the case here. Zaylen Wood's going to play a lot. Corday Sidnor is going to play a lot. I really like what they have at ends. I think they have really good depth there with DeCosmo and Agu and Sidnor. My question is more at edge. Miles Capers, I think, can take a step and be a player for them. He showed some good things at times last year. Jalen Roos had a good camp. BJ Diakite, or Boubacar Diakite now, he's been hurt for a good bit of camp. I think he's got some tools, but got some questions there. But I do like what they have on the interior. I don't know if they've got, like I said, game records, but Devin Lee, I think, is serviceable. Zaylen Wood, I think, will be a good player for them. Just, you look at the other defensive lines and the 5 stars they're bringing in. This is one of the areas where I think the talent gap between Vanderbilt and other groups is probably the biggest, just because of the bodies other teams are able to bring in. I think the way they've tried to counteract that is by having more depth and more guys they can rotate, and it's got to be the answer this year, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different style of player. You're looking at Linus Zunk and Agu and even Bradley Mann. They're tall guys, and you've seen in the past under Clark Lee those deflections at the line. You've got to get creative, just like the offensive line, switching sides. Defensive line, you're going to see a guy like a Zaylen Wood move around a lot. You're also going to see a lot of rotations, and you have to do that. You have to have 2 deep, obviously, maybe even 3 deep at these defensive line positions. But let's go over to that razor position. And we could have probably lumped this into the linebacker spot because they will be in coverage a lot. But Miles Capers is a guy that has been here and done that. Obviously, he's been hampered by injury in his career as well. But you've also got Diakite as well, like you mentioned. And then Jalen Ruth, a young guy that they like and has developed well. He's really kind of grown into his body, especially at that position. That's important too. I mean, but I think it's good you've got a guy in Capers that played some football. And even talking to him a few weeks ago, kind of at the beginning of fall camp, he brought up the fact that he has almost stepped into a new level of his game and learned from a lot. Learned from Clark Lee. And I'm not worried about either him or Diakite much in coverage. So I think that's a good thing. Now, what does that mean? Who knows for this defense? You've got really good linebackers. You've got good safeties as well. But I look at that position as a strength, and there's nothing you have to worry about there. Whereas on the edge, defensive end spot, technically, you're looking at a battle there, and you hope Agu comes through, but you also like Sidnor. And then on the interior, you've got some guys that need to step up. But I think that razor spot is in good hands, and that's a good sign for this defense.
Interesting, because I think the edge is in a better spot just based off the personnel they have. I feel like it's a battle, but I think they're more proven there, and maybe they're more athletic at razor and have some higher upside. But I really like what they've got at edge if it can all come together. I also wonder if they play some guys at razor from time to time that aren't technically razors, if that makes sense, like guys who can kind of step out into coverage and maybe give them a different look there. I wonder if that's the case, but I think they're going to need a big year from Capers. Diakite, I think, is really gifted. Going to have to prove it this year. That's my only concern with razor. Not their talent level, but just I think there's some guys that maybe aren't as proven there. Whereas at end, Corday Sidnor obviously has done some things at the Power 5 level, but obviously you look at his last year at Purdue and kind of got nudged out there a little bit. Yeah. Not nudged out of the program, but nudged out of the role he had. Darren Agu, I think there's questions with him. To Cosmo, I think you have a little bit of questions with. You kind of know what you have there, though, and it's not a superstar. So I think they have maybe more superstar potential with guys at the razor position, but I think they're pretty far from having that materialize at the moment.
On the interior, Devin Lee has to step up. Issa Wataha also has to come into his own.
It's a huge year for Issa Wataha.
I mean, there's some pressure on him to really grow into that $97 million body like Larry Black and Javon Hay have joked with him about. He's got all the tools. He's got everything you want in a defensive tackle, a nose tackle, whatever you want to call him. But again, you haven't seen it yet. And I'm sure fans are sick of us saying that, but that's a lot of this team where you can envision it and you think, you've seen it in practice, but you got to go out there and do it in a game. I thought he even showed some flashes last year at times in games. I think that Auburn game was one that stands out, and even against Georgia, I thought he played decent. But he's a guy that has to perform this year. Devin Lee, Christian James, who obviously has been hampered by injury. Joey, that interior spot, got to be better. I mean, they were just they were gashed last year at times, and that's a position that has to improve.
Yeah, I almost think it's kind of like the baseball power thing that we talked about in the offseason, to where everybody's got to hit 2 more home runs. It's not like one guy's got to get drastically better. Maybe Wataha's the guy that you look at and say maybe he could be a lot better. But I also look at it and say, can Christian James stay on the field and give them something? Can Bradley Mann be more of a factor than he was last year? Can Linus Zunk do that? I think that's going to be the key for the interior defensive line. It's not can somebody turn into a superstar. It's can they have more guys be serviceable and make an impact on the game consistently? And I still have questions about that.
Either way, this defensive line is very important to this team and their success. You got some different aspects. You got some guys that are going to play multiple spots like a Zaylen Wood, and probably some guys that are going to play some Razor that maybe won't always play Razor. So that's the defensive line preview, and we will keep it rolling with the defense. That's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks for watching another episode of the Vandy Sports Podcast.